Hi, and welcome to Wait, Hold Up, What? I am your host, as always, Dawn. And in today's episode, we have a guest by the name of Delisha Nyami. And, we talk a little bit about resilience. Actually, we talk a lot about it in this episode because being called resilient can be kind of a strange compliment to accept, not because it's a negative. Obviously, it sounds amazing. And this ability to bounce back from difficult experiences or to adapt to adversity and move forward, it's obviously something to be very proud of. But in order for us to be considered resilient, we actually have to walk through the fire. And that's not exactly what anyone dreams of. And so, in this episode, as we speak to Delisha, she is actually the author of a trilogy memoir series called ResilientAF. And we talk about her journey and some of her story and how she was able to access resiliency and find love for herself as a person and joy again. And so you can find her books on her website, which we will put in all of the social media stuff. But her first book is called Kissing Asphalt, the courageous true story of one child's unbreakable spirit from kidnapping and abuse to self-love. And her second book, Not My Circus, is available for pre-sale now. So please enjoy our episode on resiliency with Delisha Nyami. Wait, Hold Up, What? Is sponsored by... Can a bra help change the trajectory of a girl's life? Did you know that nationally only 20% of girls engage in at least 60 minutes of daily physical activity, a lower rate than boys? Or that girls' participation in sports drops off significantly from the ages of 10 to 17? Wait, hold up, what? Yeah. Some of the barriers that contribute to this include lack of financial means, lack of role models, dropping body confidence, and concerns about body changes, including breast development and the need for a sports bra. The simple intervention of a sports bra, along with the normalization of body development, can change the trajectory of a girl's relationship with body movement for her whole life. You heard that right, her whole life. Every girl deserves to feel comfortable and confident in her own body. And that's why Bras for Girls partners with more than 25 athletic brands and donors just like you to distribute new, high-quality sports bras and breast development booklets to girls in need, ranging from the age of 8 to 18. Let's get girls in well-fitting sports bras right when they need them the most. Girls plus sports equals a beautiful world. You can donate to Bras for Girls today at brasforgirls.org. And as a side note, Eliminate Girl Hate has partnered with brasforgirls.org and will be donating a proceed of all merchandise sales to helping girls get in the bras that they need and keep them in sports. You can help by shopping the Eliminate Girl Hate store today. How many times have you heard the words workplace and culture used together and found yourself rolling your eyes at the thought? Believe me, I'm with you. I'll be honest, as I record this, I just rolled my eyes. That's because the word culture has become homogenized in such a way that they actually had us believing ping pong tables and pizza were symbolic of a good place to work. COVID changed that. Remote work was a success in the eyes of many, and as such, our ideas of what constitutes a good workplace culture have changed, and it boils down to one crucial element: equity. Now, don't you roll your eyes again on me. It's true. The expectation of employees is that they have a work environment and culture that works for them, regardless of who they are. No more cookie cutter swag and Pizza Hut deliveries, mandatory after hours, happy hours, and all of the other things they do to make us feel like we're a family. This is especially true for women. Remote work gave many more hours in the day, the flexibility to feel more productive and present, and a choice in how and what style of work is best for who they are and what they do. This is at the core of what equity means, because the old way was made for one group of people. And this is where Eliminate Girl Hate comes in. We help create safe and equitable spaces for girls and women, and we help the companies that employ them be more profitable in the process. Not rolling your eyes anymore, are you? Check us out at eliminategirlhate.com. Use code WAITHOLDUPWHAT in your contact form for a free consultation call and see how we can help you and your business. Have you ever dreamed of writing a book? I know I have. Or maybe, also like me, you've started a manuscript. Maybe you've started 10 and you've just never finished it, or never let anybody else read it, or never thought you could publish it. Wherever you are in the process, Jim Woods would like to help. Jim's a writer just like you, but he's also a coach who loves helping writers bring their books into the world and make them a reality. If you are like me, sometimes you need that push, a supportive but demanding cohort along the way to put your stories out into the world and keep you on track. Jim Woods is that cohort. Visit jimwoodswrites.com and click the Let's Chat button. Mention our podcast for a free clarity call and get your story out into the world because we need it. We are sponsored by Epiphany Recording Studio. Creativity needs to flow freely if you want to reach that aha moment that we're all looking for. At Epiphany Recording Studio, their goal is to create space that takes full advantage of those moments. From podcast and video production to music creation, you get the support you need to create compelling stories with a competitive sound. Your ideas can flow freely because they partner with you free of judgment, ready to be vulnerable, do the work, and make your projects look and sound their best. So let Epiphany Recording Studio help you reach your artistic vision by visiting them today at epiphanyrecordingstudio.com. Tell them Dawn sent you. Let's get this episode started. Hi, and welcome to Wait, Hold Up, What? The podcast. I'm very excited today because I have a guest that I don't really know. And so we're going to get to know each other at the same time. I'm going to say your name, but I'm not going to even attempt the last name because I did it in my head and then I was like, maybe I'm wrong. So Delisha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Tell everybody your first and last name and where are you joining us from today?
My name is Delisha Niami, and I'm coming to you live from the Santa Cruz Mountains.
I'm so excited because Miami is how I thought it was. But when I said it out loud, I was like, wait, Miami with an N? Like, maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're totally right. And everybody gets it wrong for whatever reason. People say Miami. And I always say, like, how do you say Miami? Like, you don't say Miami. Like, why does it? I don't know why everybody does it, but they do.
What is the origin of that last name?
Arabic.
Do you know?
Arabic.
Yeah, it's really pretty, like seeing it written, but then even hearing it is kind of nice.
Oh,
but I also, full disclosure, when I originally saw your name in writing, I tried to make it fancier and say Delicia. So I think we just have this, we see something that is not what we normally see, and we just automatically try to make it fancier, right?
Oh, I have had, you can't imagine the amount of variety that I have heard on my name.
I can only imagine.
It's been crazy. I mean, I think the funniest, craziest one ever was when I was doing a telesales job at Rainmaker, which I write a little bit about in this new book. But somebody called in and my coworker pops her head over the little partition and she said, "Delica, you have a phone call?" I said, "Okay."
Like,
Delica, that's new.
It is funny. I did customer service on the phones years and years and years ago. And people always called me the wrong name. It was like Star. And I'm like, how do you get Star from Dawn?
Right.
But it was like over and over again. Like it wasn't just once. So it's very funny how things like that happen. Telephone game, right?
Yeah. That was a fun game in the 70s.
Right. I literally just played it over 4th of July with my nephews and family at a table.
Oh, how fun.
And it's so cute to do it with little kids because they were purposely trying to mess us up and like being a little mischievous, but it was kind of fun. So Delisha is the author of almost 3 books. It will be 3 books. So she likes to call it a memoir trilogy or a trilogy memoir called ResilientAF, which we all know what that means. And in it, like many people, your life story doesn't often fit into one book or a few short pages, right? My favorite memoir in the history of memoirs is Maya Angelou, and hers is 7 books long, right? And so a lot of people only know Why the Caged Bird Sings, but in reality, her memoir is actually 7 books long.
Wow.
And it's funny because so many people don't know that. And, it speaks a lot to the world that we live in that we try to put these memoirs into, 200 pages. And our life doesn't typically surround one event or one particular trauma, right?
Yeah,
And depending on how long your life is, there could be a number of them. And
absolutely.
I think when we grow up, we don't always know that, right? Because we see TV shows wrapped up in 30 minutes or movies wrapped up in 2 hours, and everybody lives happily ever after. And that's not the reality of life, right? Life is a consistent roller coaster ride of events. And that's kind of what your memoir explores. And so, what I want to kind of do is start a little bit at the beginning. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Los Angeles in the Valley. I'm a Valley girl, like totally. Oh my God. Um, yeah. So, uh, I actually, when I was the first book, Kissing Asphalt, starts when I'm 4 years old and I'm kidnapped by my biological father and taken to Baghdad for 11 and a half months. My mom had to fight to get us back through the FBI, CIA, lawyers, attorneys, because as soon as he got us over onto Iraqi soil, she lost all rights, any and all rights. And so it was a real challenge. And it was before Not Without My Daughter, which was a famous movie that came out. And this happened like years before that movie came out. And I'm like, yeah, that's my life. That's what happened to me too. It's kind of crazy, but that's just chapter one of the book. And like you said, it can't all fit into one. And I did have a couple people that said like, oh, in the reviews, like she should have just done one book. But I'm like, no, I think people will understand now that
Yeah.
this book is coming out, why I split it up the way that I did. And,
So let's actually back up. Your parents, well, first of all, your parents are married
mhm,
originally,
for
right?
10 years.
And
Yeah.
and your father was from Iraq?
Yes.
Okay. And where was your mother from?
She was born here in LA.
And when were you born? What year are we talking about in this?
I was born in 1971.
71. Okay. So we're talking 1975 taken. And was a divorce happening? Like, was something precipitate that?
Yeah, so my mother and father were in the process of separation, and they had been separated for almost a year by that point. And my mom was pretty set on divorce, and she was dating another guy who just happened to be a cop, which is kind of interesting. But they had taken a vacation to Big Bear, which is so ironic because that's where I first started writing Kissing Asphalt, was when I went to Big Bear. But they took a vacation to Big Bear, and my father was supposed to come get us for our Easter break. And so everything was, quid pro quo, if you will. And she had no idea he was not going to be taking us to Disneyland, but rather to Baghdad.
And it was you and a brother, is that correct?
Yeah, my brother Niall,
And how old was Niall?
7.
7 at the time.
Yeah.
And this may be, I don't know if this is a memory that you have or not, but at 4, do you have any comprehension that what is happening shouldn't be happening?
No, and I talk about that in the book. Like, I just figured, my brother was tasked with a lot back then. Like, I know he felt the huge burden of taking care of me. Like, he realized what was going on. I didn't, and
Mhm. Yeah.
when we were told we were going to Disneyland and we ended up at LAX, my brother's the one questioning, like, what are we doing here? This isn't Disneyland. Like, and my father just immediately had an answer like, oh, I'm taking you to Disney World, son. And so then we both got all excited. We're going to Disney World. We've never been there before. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Get on a plane and end up in Baghdad. So, and then once we got there, then I think my brother really felt now he doesn't remember any of this. He says he blocked out his whole childhood and, he's a very different human being than I am now. We get along great now, but there was a long time where we didn't. But he really was my protector. And that's why I dedicated the first book to him, because up until the time I was 6, I don't know how I would have made it without him, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, he really he took me under his wing and saved me on numerous occasions.
When you were there, like, was your relationship with your father good?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Okay.
No, he
Um,
always treated me like trash. I was the
and
girl. I was worth nothing. I was a piece of trash. I was the 4-year-old who was made to stay up folding his thousands of socks,
sure.
even though I was exhausted and all I wanted to do was, and that's my memory of there. My memories are what I wrote in the book, like staying up till midnight folding this man's sock, getting $1 for Christmas when everybody else had hundreds of presents to open, and he bought himself a Mercedes Benz. Like, I mean, stuff like me going and asking him when we're going back to mom, when some random mystery guy shows up at the door and being slapped and sent flying backward, because these are like the vivid memories that I have. And I was only 4, it's like,
Throughout the course of your life, have you always had a connection to those memories, or was there a time when you didn't have them?
no, I've always had a connection. I've tried to actually bury them on
Yeah.
numerous occasions, but it hasn't really worked. And it's just they're part of me. I mean, I was kidnapped, and I just said this to myself today, like a guy who was my neighbor for a long time in Boulder Creek. I looked at him as a father figure, and he came down just as recently and helped me kind of restore a vintage RV that I had, and was like, "Oh, this is a father-daughter project. I'm so proud, blah, blah, blah." And he ended up like bailing on me, abandoning me in the middle of it. And it was just so hurtful. And, it's really unfortunate. I've tried so hard in my life to like grasp on to these various father figures, and none of them have stuck. I'm just a fatherless child. And that's just the reality of it. And, I just literally just said that to myself this morning. Like, you have to just keep reminding yourself of the reality of the situation. Like, my biological father's dead now, and I did have a relationship with him later in life, but it was not good, and it just, yeah, I'm just a fatherless kid, and that's just part of my history, and no matter how hard I try, the men have just been disappointing, honestly. The only one who hasn't been is my Uncle Dennis, and he's just, my aunt and him divorced 20 years ago, and I had lost contact with him for 20 years, and I finally just reached out to him a few years back, and it's just been so wonderful having a man that I trust and love back in my house, in my life again.
And I think there's a generation of children, boys and girls, that would relate to that concept of being a fatherless child. And maybe they don't have the same situation as you, right? But there is a generation in which that was pretty common.
Yeah. I think it was
And
my generation.
yeah, and it all, well, actually, there were a number of generations like that, but I think that they were different, right? Like, you have these generations of children who grew up where the father was the income earner and he was out in the fields and he was doing all that. So there wasn't a lot of love or connection or that type of thing, right? And that's one thing throughout history. And then we come into more modern times where you do have two parents in the house, maybe more sharing of duties, but those men left, or they other things happen, and so it's a different version of the fatherless child, because maybe you thought you had it and then it disappeared, and so
Right.
it's the loss of something you had versus the loss of something you never had, right? And you see that a lot in children of the 70s and 80s in a lot of ways. And I think what you said in being a fatherless child, first of all, that's very, there's something to that like, people who can't see me, like, your shoulders kind of shrug, or your heart kind of comes in, right? Because number one, I think a lot of people can relate to that, but even if you personally can't, you can relate to how that might feel, and the impact that that has. And a lot of women especially that experience that, they do what you said you would do, where they're looking for something to fill that void and a person to do that.
Yeah. Well, and for me,
Um,
unfortunately, it played out in a really bad way because I did find somebody who I thought was that person. And unfortunately, their chapter in my book is titled Trustworthy Monster Number One. So
mm,
you can imagine, what happened as a young 7-year-old trying to find a replacement father figure.
yeah, and I think that's pretty common also in that, studies have shown, more affectionate, like as a child, you become more affectionate towards male role models or I don't wanna use the word needy, but you're looking for that, and so you're expressing more need and desire, and then sometimes men or people in those positions of power can take advantage of that. And so, how before we go in that direction, how did you end up after 11 and a half months, how did you end up coming home or being reunited with your mother?
So she found an attorney in Baghdad who took some pity on her and drafted actually that was the mystery man at the door that I write about. He showed up and negotiated with my father. This was after my mother had sent him a letter. I have a binder that I acquired after she passed away, with every single receipt. She kept every receipt, every phone message, every piece of paper. That's how I knew the address to write in the book, because it was the exact address where we lived, because that's where all the correspondence went. That's how I
Mm.
knew what hotel my father took us to. And he wrote, I have the exact letter that he wrote to my mother on the Seven Seas Hyatt Hotel Regency letterhead, like before he took us, that basically said, um, I don't know, can you cuss on your show?
You can do whatever you like.
Okay, because this is what the letter said, you fucked me, and now I'm about to give you the biggest fuck you've ever had in your life. By the time you read this, your children will be in another country and you won't be, and they're going to live a better life. And, he was trying to get us Iraqi citizenship. He was like, I mean, it was serious. And
Yeah.
thank God for my mom, because being a lesbian, I actually just wrote an op-ed that finally just got picked up, thank God, by the Bay Area Reporter, but talking about how patriotic I am, and the title was "What It Means to Me to Be Gay and American," and it was all about being kidnapped and taken to Baghdad, and like the thoughts that I've had throughout my life of, oh my God, what if my mom wouldn't have gotten us back? I probably wouldn't even be alive anymore. I definitely couldn't be myself.
Sure.
What my life would have been like. I have no idea, but I'm so grateful for the
Mm.
freedoms that we have in this country and the liberties that are provided to us as individuals in this country. And it's something that we're fighting so hard for right now. And it's just like, it's really ironic that my book came out right now. You know what I mean? It's like, because it talks so much about LGBTQ freedom. And a lot of that stems from just my catastrophic mind. It goes to like catastrophic thoughts. And I just constantly, I'm like, what would have happened if my
Yeah.
mom hadn't gotten us back, But thank God this attorney took pity on her, and she had already written him a letter saying she was going to commit suicide if she didn't get her kids back because she had nothing to live for. And he basically said, here are my terms. You don't prosecute me for kidnapping. You say that you gave me permission to take the kids. I don't owe you any child support moving forward or backward, and like all these different things that basically, relieved him of any responsibility for stealing his children, ripping them away from their mother and taking them to a foreign country far, far away. It just,
Did he travel back with you to return you, or did he send you on your own?
so they had to send us back on my 5th birthday. So we
Mm.
came back on March 6th, 1976, because I was 5 years old. And they wouldn't allow me to fly, even though my brother was 8 at the time. They wouldn't allow us to fly by ourselves until I was 5.
When you came back, was it a conversation? Like, did you all talk, like, throughout the years even? Like, was it a conversation with your mom, or was it kind of just like, "You're home, let's move on, and let's never talk about this again"?
Well, it wasn't let's never talk about it again. It was you're home, let's move on. Let's revisit the past for a minute, because like when we came home, my mom had the house decorated like Christmas. I'm going to cry, even though it was March.
Mm.
Because she wanted to celebrate. She didn't want to miss Christmas with her kids. And
Of
we
course.
celebrated our birthdays the same day. And because she had also missed our birthdays. And then we went to Disneyland because that's where he was supposed to take us. And it was just, yeah. But then after that, it was kind of like, yes, this is what your father did. It was a matter of fact. You know, my mom was very matter of fact. Yes, this is what your father did. And yes, he's an asshole. And, you know, yes, he has your contact information. And no, he's never tried to contact you. And yes, if he ever does, no problem. Of course, I'll tell you. It was sort of like that. You know, it wasn't,
Do you feel like, or were you able to sense if she had a level of fear in her
my
that it
mom.
might happen again?
Oh,
Yeah.
no. My mom was a really strong person. Like really strong. Like, yeah, no, she would not put up with that. And she was very careful. Like my father would call every blue moon and ask to speak to my brother, Niall. And he'd ask him, you know, do you want to go play tennis? And my brother would say, no, bye, you know? But I'm like, hi, in the background, I'm here. I want to go play tennis, you know, little like kid, like, hi, you know? But like,
Yeah.
no, it never happened for me like that with him. I was nothing to him because I was the daughter. And this actually really came out when I was, and this will come out in the third book, The Queen of Silver Linings. But when I was about, I want to say I was about 46 to 48, something like that. And I had been in contact with my father for almost 12 years at that point. And we went to lunch one day and he said, you know what I'm missing in my life? Someone to call me dad. And I looked at him and said, you know, I'm never going to call you dad. You've never been a dad to me. Where were you my whole life? You never called. You never sent a birthday card. You never wished me a Merry Christmas. You never wished me a happy birthday. You never at nothing, complete absence. And you know what he said to me? I called Namir because Namir is Niall's first name, right? That's what he used to go by before he officially changed it. And I said, but I'm not Namir. I am Delisha, and I'm the one standing right in front of you, you know? And he said, the most hurtful thing anyone's ever said to me in my life. And that's pretty huge considering my life. But he looked at me and said, to be honest with you, I just never thought about you. And I was like, oh, that was just like such a crushing blow to my heart, because it just confirmed everything I had ever thought. And everything I thought I was catastrophizing and making bigger than it was. And like, he didn't care about me. He never thought about me. I was just a piece of trash girl in his mind. And it all became true in that moment. And it was like, ugh.
I realized that at 4, the way in which you process and what you recognize and see is different. And then also, if you've got the parent that is the dominant parent in your life saying, look, if there's contact, yes, of course you can speak. Yes, of course I'll talk to you. But you clearly didn't, as a child, maybe hold ill will or blame to him for taking you. Like, you still wanted a relationship. You still wanted him in your life in a certain degree. And why do you think that is?
Kind of. I did and I didn't. I really kind of despised him too because of the way that he treated me in Baghdad. And the things that he did to us really, really hurt. It really made me feel diminished and like nothing.
Did you think it was your fault
No.
then? Like, I realize as an adult, it's different, right? As an adult, you can see, like, no, this is a man who just doesn't believe in the equity of women or whatever, right? That women are in a lower class. So you can conceptualize that as an adult. But as a kid, do you think, well, what am I doing that makes him not think of me?
Sometimes, but mostly I knew that it was the culture
Mm,
and that
okay.
that was kind of inbred in him. And that was just expected, that since I was a girl, I meant nothing.
But did you, trying to think of the way to ask this. My sister and I talk about this a lot. It's like, neither one of us, we did not understand why things were different because we were a girl. And we were just the kind of kids that were like, no, that's stupid. I can do whatever I want. Like, we just had that naturally in us to fight back against that. So do you think that was naturally in you where you were like, oh, who cares if I'm a girl? I'm going to do what I want? Or did you start to believe the, I don't want to call it rhetoric because I don't want to dismiss a religions or a faith culture, but that cultural values, did you think, oh, that is true, girls are less?
Oh, hell no.
Okay.
Sorry, no way, Jose. No, I think I take my inner strength from my mother, who was a
Mhm.
warrior, and no, I think if anything, it had the opposite effect, and it made me rebel against that.
Yeah.
And I didn't just get that from my father, though. I got it from my mother too.
Of course.
I had an older brother who was 3 years older than me, and he could pretty much do whatever the hell he wanted. I mean, he had his own
Sure.
separate bedroom. She converted the garage into a bedroom for him. It was separate from the house. It wasn't even attached. You had to walk into the backyard, down some steps, and then there's the garage. This kid had his own bedroom at 16. He was emancipated because he didn't
Yeah.
want to move to Hawaii with us. My mom's like, I'll get you your own apartment, kid. All you need to do is not drink and drive. And I'm like, hello. And my mom's like, nope, you got to be home by 10 p.m. to me.
Yeah.
You got to be home by 10, but you're a girl. Things are different. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why? Screw that shit, But I think if anything, it made me like, you know what? It made me not want to ride on the coattails of my brother,
Hmm.
which I could very easily do because he is super famous. I mean, he's like, everybody knows who my brother is, right? I don't want to ride on his coattails because I have my own story to tell. And I've had
Yeah.
enough of that. When he went to high school with me for like the first semester, he's a good looking guy. And everybody was like, oh my God, you're Niall's sister. Oh my God, you're Niall's sister. And I'm like, hello, I have a name, I am my own person. So
Sure.
that's why I'm like, really, it was a scary thing to put these out there, but I'm
Mm.
really happy because I'm finding that I'm helping people, which was the whole purpose of
Of
putting it
course.
out there, And the fact that I'm able to do that with my little inconsequential life just makes me so happy. It just like,
And not to negate what you're saying, but no life is inconsequential, right? And it's each of us. It's going to sound biblical in how I say it, and it's not meant to be, but right? Each of us has a testimony with our life. And that testimony for some people impacts millions because of whatever happens that makes them have more attention on them than others. And some of us affect 1 to 2 people. But if
oh,
you are impacting one person in a positive way, it is that ripple effect. It is that flap of the butterfly wing that starts that movement, right?
exactly.
And it's really the reason that we have this podcast and the reason that my company exists is because throughout history, women were not allowed to tell those stories and they weren't allowed to put that into the culture and into the dialogue. And I truly believe that it is through storytelling that the world changes because it's how we empathize with each other. It's how we connect. And, there is, I've got to be careful how I say this. There are components of your story throughout that are similar to mine and a connection to mine. And so I I can not only empathize with some of what you have been through, but I can feel the strength of what you are doing to move past the negative part of that narrative and control it for yourself so that you can live the life that you are worthy of living. And that's really powerful for people to see, and to see that one trauma, two traumas, 20 traumas, right? Those do not define your future. They impact it, and they certainly have a navigational pull to where you go next, right?
Yes.
But it is what you do with that and what you decide you want to create with your life. And that is not always an easy journey. And it is not a straight line journey either.
No, not at all. And just to follow up on that, when I say inconsequential, that's how I felt my whole life.
Of
That's how
course.
people made me feel. That's how the world made me feel. And it wasn't until I wrote these books and I did start helping people, and I turned my tragedy into something beautiful by being able to help people. And I cannot even express in words how joyful that makes me. When I hear when I see or read an email from someone saying, "Thank you for writing your book. You inspired me. You encouraged me. You helped me." Like, I just, my whole message is we are all resilient. And no matter what we've been through, everybody's trauma is real, and everybody's trauma affects them on a different level. And my trauma of my mother being murdered is just as big as somebody's mom yelling at them. I mean, it could be that everybody's different. Everybody is different, right? So, like, we have to take everybody's trauma seriously, and really, we each have to, like, own our own shit, if you will,
Yeah.
and dive into it deep in order to get through it. And that's one thing that I talk about in my third book, The Queen of Silver Linings, is all about my healing journey and what I've done, the plant medicines that I've taken. And one of the things I do is breath work. And the
Yeah.
breath work journey lady, told me before I started, you don't stop. No matter how bad things get, no matter how bad the memories get, move through it. Do not stop breathing. And like these breathwork sessions have been just incredible, like monumental strides forward for me in terms of healing.
Well, and I think there's two really important things I think to highlight in that. And one is a very common expression in therapy circles and trauma circles, right? There is no big T or little t in trauma. Trauma is trauma,
Yep.
and how the body reacts to that is the same regardless of what that trauma is. And
Yep.
so, and we know, especially for women, how trauma gets trapped in the body and causes all sorts of autoimmune disorders and diseases and different things, which you and I are both familiar with. But then the other thing that you said, which I think is so important because you just naturally said it, is so many people, when they communicate about a traumatic event or a traumatic life, the goal is to get over it and to move past it. When that is not actually the way to healing. The path to healing is to go through it.
Through it. Yep.
Right. And to experience and not ignore it, because that ignoring and that holding it back, right, that is what causes it to get stuck in the body. And it causes the trauma to recycle through the body because it wants to get out. And I think that is what a lot of things happen. And sometimes that happens in a way, you had mentioned this earlier with your brother, in that he doesn't have the memories, right? So his body.
Says.
Well, so I want to.
I think he does. I just think he, like me, tries to push them down, like very, very conscientiously.
And so I want to give space for that, because so I do not have a lot of memories before the age of 12. There are a few, like, visual snapshots. And then there's also stories that have been told for years and years and years. So I know the stories so well that it
Right.
seems like a memory, but they're not actually memories. And this is a very common thing, especially when trauma happens at a young age, right? Is that our brains, right? Our bodies are built to protect us. Every part of it, whether it is our immune system, whether it is our brains and synapses, whatever that is, our fat, our muscles, all of that is built to protect us. And so sometimes the brain and the subconscious does that to you. And I've done a lot of work to try and recover those memories and to try and get a better understanding of my past so that I can heal in a stronger way, but it doesn't always happen. And whether that is a conscious effort
Mhm.
to suppress that or an unconscious effort to suppress that, for some people, that is what they need to
Exactly.
move on. And we each have a different healing journey, and it can be difficult if you are on a healing journey to see somebody doing it in a way that didn't work for you and be like, hold on, you're doing it wrong. Why don't you try this why don't you try this? Because we so badly want them to heal, right? And that we're like, we'll do this. And I am so guilty of that. I have done it with friends. I've done it with family members. It's like, well, here's what works for me. Go do it. And while I'm a firm believer in therapy and I'm a firm believer in medication and I'm a firm believer in holistic approaches, look, I'm a person who will try almost anything once if it is in the purpose of healing and
Me
if it is
too.
in the purpose of
Yeah.
moving forward, because again, different things work for different people. And so while it may be a conscious effort that he's doing, I think giving space to how people choose to go through the healing journey is important to me.
Absolutely. And everybody does it in a different way. And
Yeah.
however they choose to do it is, I mean, if you're going to do Ho'oponopono, you can say, I love you. I thank you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Or you could say, please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter. You're saying the mantra.
Yeah.
And whatever resonates with anybody else. If it's religion, go do it. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
I encourage anybody to do whatever feels right as far as like healing your trauma goes,
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that like what you said was really right on because some people, really don't remember. Like for example, in my first book, Kissing Asphalt, I did an author's note because I had a hard time remembering a lot of the stuff. And some of the stuff, one of the guys, so my molester's name was Isaac. His son's name was David, and David and I were still friends. And he basically said to me, he kept reminding me of all this stuff that my memory had like blocked out. And at
Yeah.
one point, I said, you know what? You have to stop. There's a reason why my
Yeah.
mind is not wanting to remember these things.
Yeah.
I don't need to know that your father shared me with his friends. Like, that's not something I need to remember. There was a reason why and as soon as he starts talking about it, I start getting flashes
Of course.
and like, little like actual, like I'm watching a movie and I just see snippets of stuff. Like, when we were growing up when I was growing up and people were talking about subliminal messaging. That's kind of what it is when you see these
Yeah.
flashes. And it's like, whoa, I would see like a TV flicker in front of me. And
Yeah.
then I would see myself sitting on this guy's lap. And then I would see his beard. And then I
Yeah.
would see like, it was weird. So it was like, and I told him, you need to stop. Like, I can't, if my mind doesn't. And then one other thing I started trying for therapy was EMDR.
Yes.
Forget
EMDR is
about it.
crazy.
Forget
So for
about it.
people
I was
that
like, I have enough to deal with. Like, I need to deal with what's in my mind. I don't need to bring any more negative memories into my head. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like,
So for people who don't know, EMDR, and I'm gonna mess up what the acronym stands for unless you know it off the
no, I
top of your head.
don't. I
Okay.
don't. Electromagnetic frequency
Yeah,
something.
it's not as scary as it sounds. I also wanna clarify that, but
Yeah.
it's used a lot for PTSD and other, types of complex trauma. And the concept, it can be done in multiple ways, but the ways in which I had it was holding on to little sensors that vibrate in your hands. And so what they do is they try to get you to focus on a memory or a visual, and then they turn on these kind of machines, and they vibrate in your hands at varying different speeds and timing and patterns, and then they stop and they ask you to say, okay, what do you see now? And it's sort of a way of pulling and extracting traumatic experiences and training your brain to kind of not see them as triggering or traumatic anymore, so that you can move past that. I've had friends who have done it where the actual traumatic experience, they can't even bring themselves to see it anymore. They know it happened and they know the details, but when they think about it, it no longer causes panic attacks or fear or anxiety. It is quite an emotionally draining process, depending on what it is that you're. I assume for everything, but that brings out quite a lot of emotion. And for some people, like I know somebody who did it once and that was all they needed. And then there are people who need repeat sessions because of the complex nature of their trauma. And it's just one of those tools that is out there in the therapy world to, without the use of prescription medication, to help you address trauma and things like that. It's super interesting. My experience with it was very good. Look, it was not fun. Um, I think I cried for 48 hours straight, and I slept, like I was crying in my sleep, and I slept these like super long, deep sleeps. And then there was residual like synapses happening for weeks afterwards, where it was like, oh, a vision, right? And things like that. So it's an interesting therapy. And one that, like all therapy, we talk about it as this easy fix, but nothing about healing is easy. And it does force you to face difficult things and talk about them and learn about them, and it have a relationship with them that can be uncomfortable. And so I don't want to throw out anything and say, you should do this treatment or you should do this treatment. Again, it's about finding out what works for you and being open to the experience of healing.
Absolutely. And there's so many different alternative therapies outside of medication. Like
Yes.
one that has truly helped me so much is a dialectical behavioral therapy.
And what is that?
It's DBT it's a therapy that it kind of like a sister therapy to CBT, which is
Mhm.
cognitive behavioral therapy, but DBT it gives you tools to learn where your triggers are
Mm.
and how to combat those triggers. So basically, like if you get triggered from something or someone, they have different tools that you could use, like a Dear Man, where each DEAR stands for something, and you actually do these worksheets where you write down, or if you're having a problem with somebody and you there's just a lot of good tools that DBT gives you in terms of trauma therapy, and not how to deal necessarily with your past trauma, but how to deal with trauma on an everyday basis while you're interacting with society, which has
Mm.
been one of the hardest things for me
Of course.
because I feel like such an outcast a lot of the time because, and I talk about this in Not My Circus, because of the trauma that I've endured, I feel like I've built up all these walls around me and I don't allow people in. I don't trust as easily, or I trust too much sometimes. And every time it bites me in the butt, So it's like, and things continually happen to where I trust and then I get hurt. I trust and I get hurt. I trust and I get hurt. And I feel like I try to keep tearing those walls down, but they just keep being built back up every time I get abandoned by someone or hurt by
Mm.
someone and it's just it's a hard balance. It's a delicate balance. And I think it's just so important to know that and to always keep in mind that with the dark times, there's always the rainbow in the light. You just,
Yeah.
even sometimes you can only see like a little sliver, just keep like knowing that will keep growing and growing.
Yeah.
And every day that we wake up, will be a new day, a new opportunity to embrace life the way that it should be embraced, because life is a gift.
So if you're listening, I think it's pretty obvious. We said it from the beginning. There's 3 books, so there's a lot of things that happened on, and we really, our conversation is only so long, and so we started at the beginning.
Yeah.
And you mentioned molestation, you mentioned the murder of your mom, and rather than dig into those stories, because obviously we'd like people to read your book, I want to talk about the journey to loving yourself in spite, despite, with however you want to verbalize it, with all of those things that happen. And so, the first question is going to seem weird, but I'm just super curious. I'm going to ask it. How old do you think you were when you realized that you loved yourself?
I think the shift started for me when I was about 23.
Oh, that's pretty young.
And I talk about this in the Not My Circus book. When I had adventures in Europe, and I ended up falling in love with Switzerland.
Mhm.
And the people of Switzerland, they're phenomenal. And that is why a lot of people don't know, but I'm releasing my book on August 1st very intentionally, because it's Swiss National Day. It's
Yeah.
like their 4th of July, basically.
Sure.
And Switzerland holds a really big place in my heart. And it's because it started that shift for me. It started that shift. Like, it was the first place I felt popular. I felt liked. I felt loved. I felt like people were happy when I showed up. And it was just an incredible and very strange feeling. And it started from there. And when I was about 30-ish, no, I'm at 32 when I met my ex-partner, Lynn, in the book. But she's my BFF now. And she got me a gift of the book, The Secret. And that really started like a journey to healing for me on my Crohn's disease, and thinking positively, and knowing that the universe had positive things for me and not just negativity thrown at me all the time and trauma all the time. And shortly before that, I think in between there, after my mom was killed, I went to Esalen, and that helped a lot too. Esalen is a famous place in Big Sur where a lot of people go for retreats and stuff like that. It's right on the Pacific Ocean. And I did this workshop where it was about like, we had to really like find our positive attributes within ourselves, make a list of that stuff. And I'm like, okay. But I started realizing like the people there were so encouraging and so uplifting. And some of us are still friends on Facebook, and they were just really good to me and really nurturing and kind. And they started making me believe that I was lovable. And that
So let me interrupt you for a second. Can you tell me what maybe the top 3 things are about you that were your positive traits? Then or now?
I don't really remember what I wrote, but I would say my integrity would be one thing, and my deep love that I have for not just my friends, but like just the world in general. And the fact that I feel like we should all be embraced no matter what, like for our individuality. I mean, it kills me when people like that are close to me will go around and start saying things like, oh God, that person's ugly. And I'm like, you know what? That's not nice, And I think to myself, like, maybe they're not appealing to your eye, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I'm sure they're an amazing, beautiful person on the inside, but they probably have never gotten that chance to show people that because people judge them, And so that's another quality I think I have, is that I see the world around me. And I think I learned this from a workshop I did with Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, that the people who have trauma see the world in a different way. And that I really find joy in watching a butterfly, in looking at the ocean, in feeling the sun on my skin, in digging my toes in the grass. And I don't know that, like, I'm not anybody else, so I can't speak to what anybody else feels when they do those things. But for me, it's so profound and intense.
I agree. I think part of it is because when you have, and I keep using the words and I'm hopeful that people knew what I meant, but complex trauma is right. Trauma after trauma after trauma. And when that is your experience, it, and this is my experience, I shouldn't say this for everybody, but you're constantly seeking out something joyous or something that isn't bad. And sometimes all the big things that we typically attribute to joy aren't there. And so a butterfly or the feel of sand in your toes or the wind on the ocean or something like that. It's that small, tiny second of joy, and that's all you're getting. And so those things become more because you're looking so hard for them. And you're realizing that joy comes in the simplest of things. And we, as a human condition, try to make it more complicated than that. And I think once you've faced trauma in that way, you just want simple, right?
Mhm.
You want those simple joys. And so you do that.
And on that same note, I have to say that shame on society, because you know what? Just because I'm an adult doesn't mean that I can't have fun. If I'm
No.
out there on the street singing and dancing, don't look at me like I'm a crazy person.
Yes.
Look at me and say, wow, bravo. That person knows how to have fun. You know, if
Yes.
society didn't deem us crazy or weird for going out and if a little kid did the same thing, people would be like, wow, look at that kid having fun.
Yeah.
Why isn't it the same for us? Why are adults not allowed to have fun?
Well, and I mean, the research backs that, right? And I spend a lot of time in communities that focus on wonder
Oh,
and joy
nice.
and play. And so, there's this concept of how we lose wonder as we become an adult. And before I was even in these communities, I was in my 20s and 30s, and my friends and family can tell you this, but I've always wanted to be, I don't know, maybe it's because the way I grew up or whatever it is, but I always said I don't want to be one of those adults who like turns 30 or turns 40 and suddenly doesn't know how to enjoy themselves, what they like or whatever. And so we would go on vacations and everything was a costume party for me and everything, we would stay on a golf course and we'd climb trees and we'd roll down hills well
Yeah,
into our
baby.
30s,
That's what I'm
right?
talking about.
Yeah, now I'm 48 and my body does not exactly wanna roll down a hill and my arms
Right.
might not be strong
But
enough
your
to
mind
climb a
still
tree,
does.
but my mind still does, and it's that constant seeking of wonder that I think is so important, and as an adult, we think we know it all, and you can't surprise me or I can't see something that makes me go, "But you can," and it is in those small things, and so there's a great book called The Wonder Switch by Harris III that people can read about some of this research behind wonder and why it's so important. And then there's this great guy named Gary Ware who does all sorts of work around play and the importance of play for adults. Really good resources to look if you in your life feel like you have been separated from joy or wonder and you're really seeking to get it. And then I mention this person all of the time, but Brad Montague, if you are not in the Wonder Society and you are not looking at the Wonder Workshop from the Montague family, they are the creators of Kid President. Like these are all places that as an adult you can go and you can be reminded of the wonder of being a child. And you can be reminded of this ability to play and to seek out opportunities to find joy in your life, which become really important. And I think even more important as we age.
Absolutely. And I think
Uh,
it's important to surround ourselves with people that have the same mindset. Like the people who I consider my best friends are two people who will dance and play in the street with me and sing in the rain. And they don't
Yep.
care what other
Yep.
people think because they're just
Yep.
having fun. You know
Yes.
what? And that's what it's about. And you can look at me and say, I'm crazy. I don't care. I'm having fun.
I
What
don't care
about
either.
you, staunchy little person? Like,
Well, that's the thing, like, I wanna laugh as much as possible, so, I have always been a person. I was never a sexy Halloween costume girl. Never. Now, there's all sorts of therapeutic reasons why that was. I didn't like the way that I looked. I didn't think I was okay, we can
right.
address that in therapy. But it was also because it was like, this is my chance to be whatever I want. I don't know that I want to be a sexy nurse, right? Like, I want to be something funny and I want to make people laugh and smile. And so I'd always have these weird, funny, strange costumes. And I just didn't care, right? I still do Friday night dance parties in my living room, in my underwear. I use the vacuum cleaner as a microphone, so it has the cord, right?
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, I don't close my drapes, so anybody walking by can see that.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
During COVID, I did onesie Wednesday, and I sat out in my front patio in a onesie, and I had wine, and I would do little dance routines and stuff like that. Like, I don't care. I just want to access joy however I can. And I want to invite other people to do that because it is healing. And that is what, no matter who you are and what you've been through in your life, you could think you have the most boring life in the world, right? But we have all hurt. We have all experienced loss. We have all experienced pain.
Yep.
And seeking out joy and play are ways to move past that are healthy and that are reminders that that one thing doesn't stop us in this big, beautiful life. And we have to continue. And if you are someone who deals with mental health conditions and things like that, that will to live is not always there. And I know that very personally. And so if I do not continue to seek out ways to laugh and to enjoy things through the darkness, then I succumb to it. And I don't want that. Right. And I think this concept of loving yourself is one of those things we have to seek out and find access to and understand and be unapologetic about that love that we have for ourselves. And that's really cool. And for some people, it is writing their story down. And even if no one ever saw it, that cathartic nature of putting it pen to paper and realizing, oh shit, look at what I made it through.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm pretty dope, right? Like
that happened to me actually when I was writing Kissing Asphalt. It was in the middle of, I started writing it in 2019, and in the middle of 2020, before my colon ruptured, I realized in the midst of that book, I kind of had a breakdown, and I just sat there and cried, and I screamed to the sky, like, how did I make it through this? How? And it was funny because my distributor told me, oh, yeah, you need to use the word trauma in your subtitle. And I'm like, why? And I'm thinking I don't have trauma. But then I'm like, okay, crazy. That's all you ever had, it's just, it's nuts, man. But back to loving yourself, I wanted to say one thing. After I realized that, after Esalen, one of the things I really started to do, which made a difference, and I know a lot of people say do this, but it really does work. And it's hard to do it at first, but it's super important, is I started looking in the mirror, and I can do it right now. I'll look at myself in the camera and say, I love you. I love you. And that's what I started doing. I started looking in the mirror and telling myself, I love you. And I really mean it when I say it. I don't know if you see in my eyes, but I love myself. And I know I'm a good person. And that's where I want the rest of the world to read my story and be like, you know what? If this girl can make it through all of this shit, I too can love myself. I too can find the joy in life. I too can dance in the street and say, fuck you people for thinking that I'm crazy.
Yeah. Mel Robbins talks about giving yourself a high five in the mirror in the morning.
Straight up.
And I actually do it now. And I don't want to say I do it every day. It takes practice. But this idea that you're like, okay,
I'm ready. I made it another day. High five. Good job. And then you move on. And it's just this tiny little practice. But mentally, a lot of people will roll their eyes at the things we're talking about. This idea of a high five or telling yourself you love you in the mirror. And by the way, that exercise is not easy.
No.
But the ways in which our brains are is they're consistently taking in information. And a lot of the information they take in is negative. Like,
Yes.
think about what you watch on TV. I am so guilty of this. All I do is watch stuff about cults and murder and rape and, all of this stuff. And then it can color your perception of the world to think that everything in the world is like this, right? When it's not. I heard something the other day that said, there are 10% of the people in the world that are truly good. And there are 10% of the people in the world that are truly evil. And the rest of us sit somewhere in the middle of that 80%. And so now, I don't know if that's accurate. It literally was on a TV show called The Mayor
It
of
feels
Kingstown,
right,
I think. But it feels so right?
Yeah.
And if that is the accurate thing, then that means 80% of us are just doing the best that we can. And we are trying. And that 10% that is really evil is really freaking loud.
Yeah.
And so if you can do practices by yourself, looking in the mirror, telling yourself you love you, high-fiving at yourself, doing breath work, meditating, reading, writing, whatever it is for you that can drown out the negative voices and get you back in that 80 to 90% that is either doing our best or truly good, we have a lot better odds of living the life that we want to live.
Absolutely.
And how beautiful is that?
Absolutely.
So we're going to wrap up now because our time is kind of coming to the end. And I always like the guests to have the final word. And it's kind of always the same thing. If there's one thing that a listener could take away from today and from your story, what would you want them to take away from it?
Love each other. Don't hate, right now there's so much open hate, especially in our country, and it's heartbreaking. And just let people be themselves. And like I've said before, our country is a guide for the rest of the world. And if we run our country on hate, then the world is going to follow. If we run our country on love, then the world is going to follow that message. So, we have a choice right now and we need to make the right one. And that's all I can say is just love each other.
It's very beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us, and tell everybody where they can find your books.
So I have special editions that have this really cool holographic lamination on the rainbow part of my Ferris wheel on the cover. And it's got like a gritty feel to it. And I will hand sign them. You can get that at my website, www.delicianiami.com. I'll spell it DELICIANIAMI.com. And otherwise, you can find the ebooks on sale right now on Amazon, on iBooks, on Kobo, on all the different ones for 99 cents up through November 1st. And I also lowered the price of Kissing Asphalt on the ebook to 99 cents. So if people wanted to get caught up on the first book there, they could do that. So.
And are you anywhere on social media?
I am on Instagram, DeliciaNiami author. I'm on Facebook as well, ResilientAF memoir. And yeah, you could also find me on LinkedIn as well. I have a Kissing Asphalt page on LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us and
for
sharing
having
your
me.
story, vulnerability, and lessons that you have learned. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
In this episode, we talked about a few things that I wanted to make sure I gave proper definitions to and resources to, because we talked a lot about this concept of therapy and healing, and that's so important that I didn't want to give incorrect information. So We talked at one point about EMDR. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a therapy that's used in mental health that involves moving your eyes in specific ways while you process traumatic memories. And the goal is to heal from that trauma and distressing life experiences. That is a truly Google definition. And what we talked about and how it works, as I said, it can work in a lot of different ways. And so even though it says this idea of eye movement and desensitization, for me, I didn't notice that at all because I had those two paddles in my hands that were vibrating. But it encourages you to really focus on traumatic memories, and you're experiencing this bilateral stimulation, which helps you to reduce kind of the vividness or the emotion that is experienced in those traumatic memories. You can search EMDR online at the American Psychological Association and get more information. The second therapy that we talked about and that Delisha mentioned is called DBT. And it is a type of talk therapy or traditional talk therapy that helps people learn to regulate their emotions and improve their relationships. So it becomes quite interesting as you look at it. And there are kind of some different techniques that can be used around distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, mindfulness, and emotional regulation. Cleveland Clinic, which is one of my favorite resources, quite honestly, when looking up different things around mental health and physical health, can give you some more information on that. And this dialectical behavioral therapy was developed in the 1970s. So it has been around for some time and seen some success. The other one that we mentioned very briefly was cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And a lot more people are familiar with this, but it's a type of psychotherapy that uses cognitive therapy and behavioral therapy to manage your issues and your feelings and behaviors. And it's to help you identify and challenge the thoughts that are maybe false narratives in your mind or unhelpful to your healing, and use that to change that narrative, right? So a lot of it is surrounded around an assessment of your mental health and special concerns, formulation of a plan, this kind of idea of active intervention, maintenance and relapse, and then termination and evaluation. Those are kind of the 5 stages of CBT. Again, for more information, you can go to the American Psychological Association or the Cleveland Clinic, and you can learn about those different levels of therapy and different types of therapy that might work for you. Other than that, I think most of what we talked about, we were pretty clear. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you are someone that is dealing with or has dealt with complex trauma, please know that there is help out there, and there is no shame in getting help to alleviate some of the negatives that come with complex trauma and to be able to move past it to live your best and healthiest life. And if you are struggling with mental health issues, I strongly encourage that you get help and you seek help to do that. You know, there are all sorts of ways to get help, whether it be through therapy or drugs or, confiding in someone that you know. All of those things can help. And if you are someone who is currently struggling and not really sure of a way out, please contact the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988, because there is help that is available out there. And healing happens in community, and healing happens outside of the dark 4 walls of your home or your room or the place that is telling you that you are not enough, you are not worthy, and that life is not worthwhile. So please seek out help, seek out community, and be good to yourself. Until next time.